A few years ago, I watched the film Invictus. It's set at the time of the Rugby World Cup in South Africa. Now, rugby was seen as the sport of the white minority, the Afrikaans, the elite, not the sport of the black majority. And tensions were running high because it was just after the end of the apartheid regime. And the world's media were focusing on what was going to happen. And then Nelson Mandela, the new president of South Africa, made a key decision. He decided to put on the green jersey of the South African rugby team. What a gesture. In one huge symbolic moment, he was saying, "We are all South Africans now." He was the president. The world's TV cameras were focused on him as the key person in this event. He'd taken a very courageous decision. And in that act, he was demonstrating his power. But he was also demonstrating his love for all the people who made up the new South Africa. It was a hugely inclusive decision that took great courage and great authority too. It was an act full of power and full of love. There's a guy called Adam Kahane. He's an experienced advisor on solving complex national and international problems. And in his book, he says that in order to address our toughest challenges, we must exercise both love and power. By power, he means the drive to achieve one's purpose, to get the job done, to push things to a conclusion. By love, he means the drive to connect, to bring people together and to unify. He argues that if we choose either love or power, we'll get stuck in recreating existing realities or worse. If we want to create new and better realities, at home, at work, in our communities, in the world, we need to learn how to integrate our love and our power. And this connects with a very important quote by the late Martin Luther King, who said that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. And let me explain more about what I mean by power and love. By power, I mean words like driven, pacey, relentless, indomitable, challenging, having high expectations, holding people to account, being assertive, confident, and determined. By love, I mean the kind of things like kind, inclusive, collaborative, building relationships, being invitational, asking for help, empowering others, showing compassion, being humble, and demonstrating empathy. I'm going to suggest in this and in the other 4 films in this series, it's not a question of power or love. If we are to be effective as leaders, as teachers, and indeed as people living our lives in the world, then we need to show both power and love in what we do and in how we behave. In this series, I'm going to look at 5 different aspects of power and love. Power and love in teaching, in professional development, power and love in school leadership, in system leadership, and power and love in our own lives. First of all then, power and love in teaching. Now the power in teaching is in believing that the students can become what they might be, that their potential is massive, that they can achieve and they can make huge progress in their learning. It's holding on to the absolute belief that the students can and will achieve in your classroom. The power in teaching is when we push towards that goal relentlessly. It never says, what can you expect from a child like this? It's also about clear boundaries, high expectations, and strong behaviour management systems. It's about teaching with pace and with confidence and with enthusiasm. Now, I've visited hundreds and hundreds of classrooms over the years, and frankly, I've seen far too many lessons that have lacked power. Too many lessons where the work is not challenging enough for many children, where expectations are too low, where tasks are unfocused and too loosely defined, where the teacher is not confident enough about the subject content, where there's low-level disruption, which is tolerated, or where children aren't clear enough about what is expected of them, where the lesson meanders and then is hastily packed up at the end, rather than arriving at a clear conclusion with the learning reinforced. To my embarrassment, I've probably taught some of those type of lessons myself. But when you see power and pace and enthusiasm and confidence in teaching, it's great to see. There's excitement and curiosity and big steps forward in understanding. It's often fantastic to be a learner in those lessons. But confidence and pace and authority are essential to good teaching, but they aren't sufficient. If the power element in teaching is about ambition for children and a focus on outcomes and high expectations, then the love element accepts completely every child who comes into our classrooms, whatever their background. We accept them for who they are, for whatever baggage they are bringing to our classrooms, whatever's happening to them in their personal lives. Love in teaching is about empathy and kindness and acceptance. The power in teaching is the ability to hold the belief that the student can and will develop and achieve in your classroom and pushing towards that goal relentlessly. But the love in teaching accepts and understands their current level, accepts them for who they are and doesn't expect them to be anyone other than themselves. Then finds the best way to bridge the gap and accelerate progress. The love in teaching is focused on the needs of the child. In his seminal book, Visible Learning, John Hattie suggests that when people are asked to identify the teachers who really made a difference to their education, those who really turned them on to a subject or perhaps a future career, who inspired them, most people will think of just 2 or 3 of their teachers. Invariably, these teachers were confident, knowledgeable, and enthusiastic teachers. But there were also teachers with whom we had a personal connection, who engaged us and empathized with us. Those special teachers who we'll always remember invariably showed power and love in their teaching. Now, in a sense, there's a false dichotomy here between the so-called traditionalists and the so-called progressives. This is very much a live issue on Twitter at the moment, with battle lines drawn up and each side pilloried by the other. The so-called traditionalists believe that anything other than direct, explicit instruction delivered by an expert to a novice will disproportionately penalise students, especially those from low-income backgrounds. They believe that learners in school need fully guided instruction and that students aren't good at making choices that optimise their own learning. They believe in a knowledge-rich curriculum devised by experts and then passed on to students through great direct instruction. They believe that the main aim of formative assessment is for the teacher to decide what to do next, not necessarily for the student to take ownership of the learning. They believe that too often in the past, students have had too much say in lessons, leading to weak boundaries and poor behaviour, and too much time has been wasted in relatively meaningless activities such as group work. Now, the so-called progressives believe that students need to have voice, be involved in making choices and taking responsibility. That if students self-direct their own learning, it's more likely to be sustained and to motivate and engage them in their learning. They encourage self-assessment and peer assessment among students, and they focus on skills and competencies as much as on knowledge. They believe in the power of group work, and they give opportunities for children to discover the learning for themselves. They see the teacher as the coach rather than just as an instructor. Now, I honestly believe that this is a false dichotomy. Knowledge transfer is crucial. A knowledge-rich curriculum is important, but it's not the whole story. As Tom Sherrington says, do I want my children to learn history and geography and science as disciplines that hang together based on years of tradition and thought? Yes. Do I care if they spend time self-assessing their capacity for working independently or for collaborative reciprocity? Yes, I do. I just want them to get on with it. See, in some schools there is highly specified and directed teaching in every classroom all of the time, implemented across the whole school. This is the case in a small number of multi-academy trusts in England, and is the case in some charter schools in the USA. As Professor Jal Mehta said, use 5 minutes to fill out this graphic organizer, then you take 2 minutes and discuss it with somebody else, then you take 2 minutes and you do this, then you take 2 minutes and you do that. If you don't, you get a demerit. That's how the pedagogy works. Now, this kind of approach to teaching is good. I'm not knocking it. It's the power side of teaching. Expectations are high. There's pace, there's challenge, there's clear boundaries. It's good stuff. To be honest, there's not enough of this kind of approach in our schools. In my view, I'd like to see more of it. But if that is all that happens, if there's never an opportunity for more open-ended learning, for students to make choices, to make mistakes, to work in a group or a team, how will they cope in the real world and later on in the world of work when they have to manage their own time? If everything is structured for you, what happens to you when it is not? Because we need both power and love in our teaching. Great teachers show love in their teaching by creating a climate in the classroom where children know that they are safe. Safe to make mistakes and learn from them. Safe to test out ideas, to take risks, to make choices and experience the consequences of those choices. Safe to disclose. Safe from harm. Teachers who teach with love as well as power are looking out for the vulnerable child in the class. They connect with the emotions of what's happening in the classroom as well as the content. They watch out for the isolated child who won't engage. They notice clear changes in a child's behaviour that might signal that something is wrong. There may be some children in your class who are not experiencing love at home, for whom a strong, caring relationship with an adult in the classroom will make a huge difference to their future lives. Within the constraints of the working day, teachers who teach with love try to find solutions that work for individual children, rather than always expecting the general approach to be the right one and for children to fit in with them. They look to remove barriers rather than create more barriers. They find the right intervention that will unlock the learning in each child. Who can ever forget the piece in Educating Yorkshire a few years ago when the student with a serious stammer was able to get a C grade in his English because the English teacher gave him headphones and music to listen to reduce his stammer during the English oral exam. That's the love side of teaching. So have we got the balance right? Too much power without love, and the children will be disempowered as learners. You won't connect with their needs, and the vulnerable or isolated children will lose out. Everything will be done for them, and they won't learn to make their own choices. But too much love in your teaching without power, and the learning will lack structure and pace. Expectations will be too low. Children will be confused and lack boundaries, and underachievement will ensue. Now, in the next session, we will be considering how the theme of power and love applies to professional development. But in the meantime, let me sum up what I'm saying here. Power in teaching is about the authority of the teacher and clear boundaries. It's about pace and challenge in the lesson. It's about being knowledgeable and confident about the subject, and about being ambitious for the children, having high expectations. Love in teaching is about focusing on children as they are, creating a safe climate, being inclusive in your approach, showing empathy and care to the young people, and helping pupils to take responsibility for their own learning. If it helps, think of it as A&E, ambition and expectation, and acceptance and empathy. I'll return to this theme at the next session.